I haven't spent nearly enough time on bikes or micromobility on this channel, so we're going to hit that today, and the inspiration for this week's video is a Medium article from early 2018 by this guy. This is CityNerd, weekly content on cities and transportation. Viewer-suggested topics always more than welcome, but today I'm taking inspiration from myself. So in a way, this article was a precursor to my YouTube channel. It's a top 10 list, obviously, but also, like a lot of my videos, it was inspired by my urgent need to answer a question that in itself is kind of trivial, but kind of opens the door to thinking about a lot of interesting things like what's an ideal distance for a bike trip? How do we design the cross sections of our bridges? What do the connections at each end look like? And also, it was inspired by a news item that just didn't smell right to me. It was this article in the Vancouver Courier entitled "Burrard Bridge Named Busiest Cycling Route in North America." Well, I guess the Courier is now branded as vancouverisawesome.com on the web, which, well, journalism has always been like 90% civic boosterism anyway, so this is really just Vancouver self-actualizing. Anyway, despite the bold claim of the headline, all the article is actually saying is, among the locations in North America that have an eco counter, which is a specialized bike data collection system, the Burrard Bridge had the most daily bike trips. Which, sure, but the vast majority of bike routes in North America do not, in fact, have eco counters. So the headline and the article just seemed pretty unsatisfactory to me. So I wanted to go back and update this top 10 list with newer data and take a look at fresh candidate locations and expand on some of the thoughts I had about what it all means, which I think has taken on more importance with the emergence of e-bikes and micromobility. Of course, as I was researching the latest and greatest, I came across this gem from the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation website, which doubles down on the North America's busiest bike lane claim. Oh, also this dude at Tree Hugger ripped off my idea of debunking the claim, but unfortunately, or suspiciously, makes the same spelling errors as in the Vancouver is Awesome article. It's not the Tickham crossing, it's the Tillicum Bridge of the People. Come on. So let's talk through methodology a bit. First, why bridges? Well, first, bridges are cool, but also, as far as traffic counts, bridges provide the kind of natural, discrete screen line you love if you're doing something nerdy like transportation data collection and modeling. For data, we'll talk as we go through, but it's messy. What I want is an average weekday in a non-winter month. New York City DOT uses the average weekday for April through October, and I like that, so that's what I'm going for. But a lot of the bridges I'm going to talk about only do spot counts, or the data is old, or they counted it on a weekend. So as with all my lists, this one isn't definitive, just the best I could do with the data I had. Also, before we get into it, I just wanted to create a point of reference. If you go to like Copenhagen or Amsterdam, if you really must, you can be looking at 30,000 plus on similar facilities. Okay, too much preamble, so let's get into it. For number 10, let's start in New York. This is the Brooklyn Bridge, which did not make the cut in my Medium article top 10, but things have changed since 2017. They repurposed a general travel lane as a two-way protected bike lane in September 2021. And I wouldn't normally do this, but there is exactly 1 month of clean post-project data, which is October 2021. So that's the number I'm going with. You can really see the jump in ridership when the new lanes went in mid-September. And it'll be fun to look at the 2022 data and see if it continues to draw more trips. Number 9 is the Steel Bridge in Portland. I don't think I've talked about the Steel at any point on this channel, so let's take a moment because it is extremely cool. It's a double-deck lift bridge over the Willamette. The upper level is the primary river crossing for the Max Light Rail network with tracks on the inside lanes and general vehicular lanes on the outside, with sidewalks on the upper deck too. The lower deck has Union Pacific tracks, which besides freight also carry the Amtrak Cascades and the Coast Starlight. And it also features a bike ped path connection between the East Bank Esplanade and the Waterfront Park on the west side. For the bike count number, all I had to go on was average daily summer traffic from 2014, which I scaled down a bit since summer's going to be a bit higher than the broader seasonal average I want. Number 8 is the Fremont Bridge over the Ship Canal in Seattle. This one's interesting. The bridge itself is a somewhat constrained shared sidewalk situation, so it's not ideal, but sometimes it's more about what it connects to, especially if it's a fairly short bridge like this. The Fremont does have great connections to the Burke-Gilman Trail on the north side and protected or buffered bike facilities on the south side along both Dexter Avenue and Westlake Avenue. This one does have an eco counter installed, so it's easy to pull the data and get a good 2019 number. Number 7 is the Hawthorne Bridge in Portland. It used to carry even more bike trips, but the Tillicum Crossing opened a bit to the south in 2015, and it promptly cannibalized a couple thousand daily trips. The Hawthorne also has an eco counter, so like with the Fremont, I was able to grab an average weekday in April through October 2019. So let's talk about this for a minute. For both the Fremont and the Hawthorne, you can see that the bike volumes declined when the pandemic hit, and they haven't really recovered. The thing here is, the bridges on this list do vary in terms of how much the onset of the pandemic affected bike volumes. Some of them were hard hit, but we're gonna see bridges on this list that are actually experiencing their highest volumes ever right now. So it's interesting to think about why that is and the different trip types that different bridges accommodate. Number 6 is the Outer Drive Bridge in Chicago, which carries Lakeshore Drive and the Lakefront Trail over the Chicago River. Okay, so let's talk about this. The Chicago data is really tough to find. I know this bridge goes in the top 10, but it was really hard to pin down volumes. I had to grab this Lakefront Trail count document from 2010 and interpolate a weekday bike volume for the bridge from the two closest count locations to the north and the south. What I came up with was low 5,000s for the average weekday, but this was pretty rough, and I don't like the fact that it's 2010 data. I bet the number's higher now. I also wanted to take a closer look at the Kinsey Street Bridge, which made my 2018 list, and a couple other bridges, but nothing I saw indicated any of them would have cracked the 4,000 a day threshold. Anyway, the Lakefront Trail is important for commuting, but recreation too, so this one does big weekend numbers. Number 5 is the Ballona Creek Bridge in Los Angeles. This is a weird one. All the other bridges we're talking about are obvious commuter routes directly into a central business district. LA is LA though, it's polycentric. Ballona Creek is not a large body of water, but the bridge is an important connection along the Strand, which is an oceanfront bike path that runs from Pacific Palisades all the way down to Torrance on the LA coastline. The data for this is a bit lacking, but they counted 2,360 bikes during the peak 6 hours of a weekend day, which, to be conservative, I just doubled to reflect a full day. You can quibble with that, but I think it's fair. This is also almost certainly a lower number on weekdays, but it's still pretty busy on weekdays. Number 4 is the Burrard Bridge in Vancouver, BC. So no, it isn't the busiest bike lane or bike bridge in North America, but considering Vancouver is a metro area of only 2.5 million or so, 4th on this list is pretty strong. I couldn't find the eco counter interface, so I'm not sure if it's installed anymore, but the city does have a spreadsheet of daily counts on its website. We can use the handy dandy Street View time slider to look at how the bridge has evolved over time. In early 2009, you've got 3 motor vehicle lanes in each direction with bikes up on the sidewalk. In the summer of 2009, they repurposed one of the southbound lanes to create a protected bike facility. And then in 2018, they repurposed one of the northbound lanes. The most recent view is from May 2022, and you can see lots of bike activity. The bridge connects from Kitsilano and the close-in neighborhoods south of downtown, and it feeds into a great protected bike network downtown. Maybe the best in North America. Could be a top 10 video. Number 3 is the Manhattan Bridge in New York, which connects downtown Brooklyn to lower Manhattan. And that's like a 2-mile ride. The bridge has a dedicated two-way bike facility running along its east side, so yeah, between the destinations it connects and the separated facility, that's gonna generate a lot of ridership. Pretty good bike networks at either end of the bridge. On the Manhattan side, you connect pretty easily into the 1st and 2nd Avenue couplet if you want to get further north. And the connections on the Brooklyn side into neighborhoods like Dumbo and Fort Greene are pretty good. Brief pause while you ponder what numbers 1 and 2 might be. Consider dropping a like on the video. Subscribe and hit the bell if the spirit moves you. Consider supporting the Patreon. This channel is coming up on a year old, and I still haven't taken anyone up on the bizarre things they want to advertise on my channel. Sub count check. The channel now has enough subscribers to fill Emirates Stadium, home of Arsenal Football Club. You know, at this point, being an Arsenal supporter is not so much about being a football fan as it is just an unfortunate life choice. Anyway, Emirates isn't my favorite stadium design, but it is well situated for transit with the Drayton Park station on the Northern City line and Arsenal station on the Piccadilly Tube line. Even better is nearby Highbury, Arsenal's home prior to 2006, which was converted into flats with a communal garden where the pitch was. Now that is adaptive reuse. Honorable mentions, I did want to recognize a couple bridges that I did not have great data for, but were probably on the doorstep of the top 10. The Broadway Bridge in Portland, the Massachusetts Avenue or Harvard Bridge in Boston, the South Street Bridge in Philadelphia, and the Washington Avenue Bridge in Minneapolis, which definitely makes this list if the University of Minnesota is in session and the weather is good. And I also wonder about the Cambie Bridge in Vancouver, which also got a barrier protected bike lane in the last few years, but alas, no data. And I want to acknowledge cities that have pretty good bike mode share for North America, but don't really show up on bridges for whatever reason. DC, I did find some bridge data, but it didn't seem to crack the 4,000 a day threshold. Likewise, San Francisco, Oakland, Montreal, Toronto, and then Mexico City has been building a lot of bike infrastructure, but it's just not really a city of bridges. Okay, number 2 is the Queensboro Bridge, which traditionally has carried fewer bike trips than the Manhattan, but really saw a big jump in numbers during the pandemic. There hasn't been any recent improvement to the shared two-way bike ped path that I'm aware of, and I don't think the network on either end of the bridge has changed that much. So if you're a Queensboro Bridge user, let me know your theories. I mean, is it just all the new development in Long Island City that's driving it? Anyway, this is a good excuse for me to share a bunch of the footage I shot back in April when I was staying in the neighborhood. The connection up to Astoria along Crescent is great in my opinion. And the two-way bike lane over Sunnyside Yards is pretty good too. Again, it's like a 2 to 3 mile trip from Long Island City to Midtown Manhattan, so that's absolutely ideal for a bike distance. And number 1 is the Williamsburg Bridge, and it's still number 1 by a pretty good margin. It connects dense neighborhoods like Williamsburg, Greenpoint, and Bushwick into Lower Manhattan. The bike networks on either side are pretty strong, and the bike facility on the bridge itself is top-notch in my opinion. A two-way bike facility on the north side, separated from the pedestrian traffic on the south side, with everything elevated above the motor vehicle lanes and the tracks for the J and the M trains. So not only do you have a dedicated facility, but you basically get a 360-degree view of the city when you ride over. Maybe that gets old for you jaded New Yorkers, but I think there's nothing like it. I do want to revisit the data because it's super interesting to me that all 4 of the New York bridges that made this list had higher bike counts in 2021 than they had pre-pandemic in 2019. Compare this to other cities where I have good data, like the Hawthorne in Portland or the Fremont in Seattle. Those counts are down since 2019. You'd think work from home would be depressing numbers across the board, but New York is bucking the trend. I'd love to hear your theories on this, or better yet, facts. Anecdotally, I've observed much higher adoption of e-bikes in New York compared to Seattle and Portland, which would facilitate longer distance trips and maybe increase volumes. Also, maybe a higher proportion of discretionary trips in New York, but I don't know. It is super interesting. And that's all I've got today. Thanks for taking 15 odd minutes out of your week to nerd out on data with me. And thanks again to the patrons who support my weekly descent into a spreadsheet-induced stupor. Your support means a lot. Keep the great topic suggestions coming. I'll be back with some new content next week, and I'll see you then.